Today I'm going to show you how simple it is to load new instruments onto your 2Box DrumIt module, how you can quickly build new instrument files from samples that you own using the 2Box DrumIt Editor, how to create or edit kits using the 2Box Editor, and how to locate and use each of these on the module. This is the first of a short series of tutorials all about different functions of the 2Box module, so if you want to know more about your module, subscribe to the channel to make sure that you don't miss them as they release. And for the sake of transparency, 2Box sent me this module to review, but they allowed me to keep it in return for making these tutorials. So starting off with the basics, 2Box modules use the dsound file format or .dsnd files. This is basically a container file for the samples that the module will read to play them back. Adding these files is very simple. It's basically a case of dragging and dropping on a computer, but depending on your module, getting them on there will involve a different method. If you have a DrumIt 3 module or a DrumIt 5 Mark I module, you'll just need to hook your module up to your computer using a USB A to B cable, also commonly referred to as a printer cable. Turn on the module while holding down the top left function button. This will bring your module up as a removable drive, and you can place the .dsnd files directly onto the module's internal SD card over USB. If you have a DrumIt 5 Mark II module, the SD card is removable, so you'll need to take your SD card out of the module and place it into your computer's SD card reader or something like a USB SD card reader. Then you can place the files on the SD card and return the SD card to the module when you're finished. And loading the instruments really is that simple. You could place them into a folder that already exists, or you could create a new folder and place them in there. The new instruments will be available to assign under the kit menu straight away like the stock sounds, and you can swap folders on the module, so it's really up to you how you want to organize your files and folders. So speaking of instrument files, where can you get them? The first place to start is the 2Box Drums website. There's a link in the description, and there's a large amount of sounds available to download for free. If you have a DrumIt 3 or DrumIt 5 Mark I, some of these sounds will already be on your module, some will be brand new. Each model has a different selection of these sounds. If you have a DrumIt 5 Mark II, all of these sounds will already be loaded to your SD card. There are also a few third-party sounds available, such as the pork pie snare available on my store at the edrumworkshop.com. It comes as a digital download, and all you need to do is drag and drop the dsnd files onto your SD card, or you can create your own dsound files using the 2Box DrumIt Editor software, which is available for download on their website. Once you've downloaded and installed the editor, you can open the program and it will open up in the kit mode. Because I've already opened this before, it's just opened up the kit bank file from my SD card automatically, but right now we don't need the kit editor, we want the sound editor to create an instrument out of samples that I already own. And now you might be wondering, well, where do we get these samples from? The samples that I'm going to use are a mixture of ones from various sources, including some that I've recorded myself. But obviously I'm aware that not everybody's in that position, and the most common place to get samples from will either be a sample pack that you've bought, or samples that you've exported from a VST like Superior Drummer, Stephen Slate Drums, or other drum software. If you want the playing experience to be as close to an acoustic drum as possible, then ideally you'll want multiple samples taken from the same instrument across the dynamic range, so from really soft to really hard, and these are often referred to as multi-layer samples. In other circumstances, you might not want multiple layers, you might just want one single hit. These are often referred to as one-shot samples, or you might even want a sample loop. One important thing to note wherever you get your samples from is that they need to be trimmed properly. Each sample needs to contain a single hit and have no silence before the beginning of the sound, otherwise they might feel laggy to play. Fortunately, when you purchase sample packs, they're usually correctly trimmed. One example of somewhere that I've downloaded multi-layer samples from before is rw5samples.com. They made their bundle of multi-layered instruments free a while ago, although personally I did donate because I felt like it was worth it. And you can just click here and download all of these, and there's a bunch of great sounding samples inside. There's also a piece of software from Lustark called SD-SE, which you can use to export samples from different VSTs. It's not free software, you do have to pay for the full version, but I think it's well worth the asking price, especially if you want to export quite a lot of different sounds. Just make sure that you read over the user agreement of whatever software that you want to export, because not all manufacturers allow this kind of use in their software agreements. I'll leave a link to both of those options down in the description, and I'm going to do a different video in the future going into different methods for obtaining samples. So once you have your samples, it's very easy to create new instruments using the DrumIt Editor. Here's a quick overview of all the different functions available. So over on the left hand side is the audio file browser. This is where you can locate your samples. In the middle, this is where you create your instruments. The different instrument types will have a different number of columns available depending on how many zones they have, and you can just drag and drop samples into those columns for the corresponding zones, but that'll make a little bit more sense when I get into that in a moment. Underneath every zone column, you also get a zone volume, so if you change instrument types, you get a volume for each zone that's available. This can come in handy if the volume of one of your zones happens to be really quiet or loud in comparison to the others. One thing of note though is that if you do add a very loud sample to the zone, you might not be able to increase the volume if it's already hitting 0 dB. Over on the top right, you've got an audio monitor. This is just for listening to the instrument as you create it. There's the level metering here, and you can adjust the playback volume. Underneath this, you've got the instrument properties. You can swap between different instrument types, and they've all got different characteristics. And then underneath that is the max tune option. This setting determines how much you can tune up an instrument once it's inside the module. You can always tune them down, but tuning them up works a little bit differently. Without getting too deep into the technical details, the way that the 2Box modules allow for tuning is to change the sample rate of the samples. So the higher the max tune value, the lower the sample rate of your samples will turn out. On the one hand, lowering the sample rate will reduce the audio quality of the finished file. So even if you don't tune that instrument up, the audio quality will already be a little bit degraded. On the flip side, that does make the resulting file size smaller. So if you've got a module like the DrumIt 3 or the DrumIt 5 Mark 1 where sample space is a little bit more limited than it is on the Mark 2, that might actually turn out to be an advantage. However, if you do want to keep the best audio quality possible, it's best to keep the max tune as low as possible, or even set it to 0 if you don't think you're going to tune up the sample once it's inside your module. One simple way around this would be to tune up your samples in software before you export them. So you could have a separate D-sound file for that tuning, or you could still tune it down even if you wanted to. And then lastly, up at the top, we've got the file menu. This is where you can create a new sound. And then along in the setup menu, you've got the audio settings, and you've also got the user preferences, which allows you to change how these knobs react. And there's also a setting here called repeat rate, which I believe sets the speed at which the sample will repeat if you hold down the mouse. Okay, let's have a look at the different instrument types. So the simplest one is the kick, percussion, and loop. This is a single zone instrument type, so it doesn't matter where you hit on the pad, it's always going to create this one sound, or you can assign this sound specifically to one zone on a pad. So there is a special characteristic of this instrument type. Let me just quickly find any old sample. If I just pop this in here, you'll see that down in this bottom right hand corner, loop sound appears. This option only comes up if it's a single sample because you can't have multi-layered loops. And effectively, you'll use this if you have something like a percussion loop, and you just enable this setting, and now when you hit the pad, the loop will start, and then it will keep repeating until you hit the pad again and it will stop. If I now place another sample on this, you'll see that the setting disappears. So I'll just reset this sound now. Okay. The next instrument type is the snare or tom instrument type. And as you see here, now you've got 3 zones available. These are the head, the cross stick, and the rim, but you can click up here to rename these zones if you want to. Unfortunately, at the moment, this cross stick zone is only available when using Yamaha style 3-zone drum pads. Fortunately though, if you don't think you're going to use it, you can leave that zone free. In fact, you can leave any zone free if you want to. Next up, we've got the cymbal instrument type. And this allows for 3 zones once again. You've got the cup, bow, and edge, cup being another name for the bell. And then finally, you've got the hi-hat instrument. And this one has a little bit more complexity to it. So once again, there's 3 zones. There's the edge, the bow, and then this time there's the pedal. And these numbers here correspond to how many transitions between closed and open you want to set. So if your sample pool only has closed, mid-open, and fully open on both the edge and the bow, you could set these to 3, 3, and then 1 for the foot splash if you have it, and then hit OK. And then you'll see in the bow edge position here, it has open, 50% open, and closed. And then you've got your zones for the edge closed, the bow closed, and the pedal. Swap between these, edge open, bow open, pedal always stays the same, and then 50% open. And I believe you can have up to 15 in total here, so you can change this to 7, 7, and then 1, or you could even remove the pedal type if you wanted to and go 7, 8, 7. I'm not really quite sure why you'd want to do that, or 9 on one or 5 on another. To be honest, 5 will probably get you what you need in most cases, but if you've got the sample pool for it, you can have up to 7 of each. Now, one characteristic of the pedal is that there's only one sample pool for both foot chicks and foot splashes. So foot chick being when you put the pedal down and it stays closed, and a foot splash being when you quickly release it and it creates a splashing sound. Now, how this works is that the module will just cut off the sample early if you play a foot chick. So the very beginning of the foot splash sample becomes the foot chick, whereas if you play a foot splash, it will play the entire sample. So I'm going to swap back to the kick, percussion and loop, and let's create an instrument. So I think I'm going to start off with one of those kick samples from the RW5 bundle that I mentioned earlier. So I'll just go straight into this first one, into the wave folder, and this is all of the WAV files for this instrument. Now I can highlight these just by clicking on them, and I could either drag them individually, or if I just want to drag all of them, I can just click, hold shift, click, and then drag them all across to this head zone. And now I can preview these by clicking anywhere on this column. And if at any point it's difficult to click on one of the narrow bands to audition the sample, I can just use the arrow keys on my keyboard. And that's pretty much it for this kick drum. Now, all of these samples were already organized by velocity, but the DrumIt editor will actually put them in the correct order, even if you don't have them in the correct order. And in fact, sometimes the analysis that it does actually puts them in a different order to what you think. So for example, up at the top of this, kick 0101 and 0102 are actually swapped round compared to what they were listed as. And although this program doesn't give you any control over the samples, I've personally never had any issue with its automatic volume sorting. And in fact, if you use the correct setting on your module, it never actually only uses that particular sample for that velocity. If I play at the maximum velocity, it might actually pick any of these samples and then volume match them to that velocity itself. And that makes sure that there's always some sample variation going on so that you don't get the machine gunning effect. So the software does all of that for you and you don't have to even think about it, and it's really, really simple to use. So now I'll just go up to File, Save Sound, and I could either save this directly to the DrumIt 5 SD card that I've already got placed in my card reader, or what I usually do is just save it somewhere on my computer and then transfer it over, and then I've always got a backup. So for the sake of this, I'll just go straight to the desktop and I'll just call it Kick 001 RW5 so that I know which one it is. Saves it as a .dsnd file. Save. It takes a moment to work and then it appears up in the top corner. Now that nice DrumIt pad icon won't always come up. That's because I've got a different piece of software installed which it identifies with that icon. But either way, as long as the file extension's right, it will work. Okay, so let's make a snare drum next. New sound. Snare tom. And this time I'm going to use the samples that I've recorded myself. So I've organized these by articulation just to make it easier. And I'm going to put the head center, and this is all of the samples straight onto the head. It will calculate the velocities. Have a listen. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to put the rim shots on. Let's have a listen. And despite the fact that I don't have a Yamaha pad, just for the sake of it, I'm going to put the cross sticks on as well. Okay, sounding good, so let's save this one. And this is my pork pie 13x7 mixed. And there we have it. So we'll move on to toms, and I've got some from Superior Drummer that I'm going to use for this. I exported these using SD-SE. So let's go for the tom, heads, 10-inch tom. Sounds good. And I've got the rims here as well. As I said, you can do these individually and it will just start sorting them into the right place. There aren't any third zone samples for the tom, so I can just leave those blank. And I've just realised that I've left the max tune on +4 for my other files, so I'm just going to quickly nip back and change all those. Okay, I'll just carry on with the toms. Okay, let's move on to the cymbals. I'm going to take a 3-zone ride from Superior Drummer 2 as well. Let's go for the bell. Nice. Okay. And then if you've got the sample pool for it, you can actually make 3-zone crashes with bell, bow, and edge. However, unfortunately, I don't. Just for the sake of mixing things up, I'm going to use the Big Bird crashes from the Alesis Strike Module, which are single zone crashes. So these will just play the edge on every single zone. I'm also going to quickly make a one-shot sample and a loop sample as well. So let's create a new sound and make it into the kick perk loop. And I've got some one-shots in here. Let's go with a snare drum. Okay. Okay, and now for a loop. Save. Here's where I've just realised I've forgotten to create a hi-hat. Just pretend you don't notice the continuity errors. Okay, so I'm going to use the Alesis Strike hi-hat for this. And it looks like I've got closed edge, half open edge, and open edge. I've got pedal stomps, so no foot splash it looks like. And I've got tip closed, tip half open, and tip open, which will be the bow. So let's create a hi-hat. And there was, 3 for each of these. Okay. And we'll go closed edge on the edge closed, bow closed. And may as well do the pedal now as well. Half open, tip half open, edge open, and tip open. Okay, let's save this one. Now that I've saved all of my D-Sound files, I'm going to put them onto my SD card because that's where the kit editor is going to read them from. So I'm just going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it New Kit, just so that it's easy to find these samples. Select all of these files and copy them onto the SD card. Okay, let's have a look at the kit editor. So go over to the kit tab and then it asks me which one I want to load. I'm just going to load the default one from my 2Box SD card, which is DrumIt 5 Mark II. And this is the screen that I'm greeted with. The sound browser is showing me everything that's currently on my SD card, and then I can build kits from here. So this is a visual representation of all of the pads that are available on the kit, and they're all split up into their pad zones, which I can preview by clicking on them. And again, it's a very simple interface where you can just drag and drop instrument files directly onto either the entire drum or a particular zone of those drums. And when I say onto a particular zone, I mean for the snare and the toms. The cymbals don't allow you to do this, and neither does the kick drum. And I'll just quickly run you through the menu options up at the top. So under File, you've got Open Kit Bank, as I've just done. You can save the kit bank, but you can also import and export single kits. So the DrumIt modules use .dkit files for both entire kit banks and also for individual kits. You can't open individual kit.dkit files in the editor, only kit banks. I'm not quite sure why that is, but if you do want to export any single kits, you can create them within the kit bank and then export them individually. The import single kit option here, I believe, allows you to import one of the individual .dkits into the kit bank that's open. Then under the kit setting, you've got a list of all of the kits in this bank file, 1 to 100, and you can rename or copy a kit. So I could change the name to whatever I wanted. I'm just going to leave it the same. And then you can also choose where to place this if you wanted to copy it. And then the setup menu is the same as previously. And then once again, over to the right, I've got my monitor for listening back to things. And then underneath it shows you the name of the instrument on whichever pad zone you've selected. And you can also tune them up or down here on the editor, if the instrument allows you to tune it up, that is. And then the balance is the panning for left, right, or center. And then there's the instrument volume underneath. So you don't actually have to do any of this on the module if you don't want to. I find that the editor is a great way to very quickly throw kits together, and then you can just fine tune them on the module when you get back to your kit. So I'm going to select a kit that's completely empty, 92, so there are no sounds currently on this kit. And now all I need to do is find those instrument files that I've just created. So I'm going to go down to the new kit folder. So my kick drum's going to go straight onto the kick drum head, which is a single zone input. Have a listen. Good stuff. Then my pork pie snare is going to go onto the snare drum. And now I can preview each of the zones: head, rim, and cross stick. Okay, hi-hat. All of my toms. And then generally speaking, the stock kits tend to be set up as crash, ride, crash 2. So that's the order that I'm going to stick with. So we'll go brilliant crash on crash 1, medium crash on cymbal 3, and the ride on cymbal 2. And of course these ones are only single zone, but we've got edge, bow and bell on the ride. And now I'm just going to have a quick listen to see if there's anything obvious that needs leveling volume wise. I'm going to bring those cymbals down a bit. And I'm just going to pan everything in a basic way that seems about right for an acoustic kit. Now, something to keep in mind is that sometimes samples are already panned, so panning them on the kit can make them sound a bit weird. I'm going to wait till I'm at the module listening to it to work that one out. The only things I haven't assigned yet are the loop and the one-shot sample, so let's have a quick look at those. I'm going to put the snare sample on the rim of tom 2. So we've got the tom, and then the snare. And I'm going to put the loop on the rim of tom 4. I'm going to bring down the volume of the loop just so that it doesn't give me a heart attack when I trigger it. The last thing to do now before I save it is to go to kit and then rename. Again, you're going to call this new kit so I know which one it is, and rename. And then let's go to file, and if we just want to overwrite this file, we can just go to save kit bank, or if I want to make this a completely new file, I can save kit bank as. I'm just going to go save kit bank. And just for the sake of demonstration, I'm also going to go to file, export single kit, and I'm going to name this one new kit 2, and save that to the SD card as well. And now let's take this over to the module for the last part of this guide. So here we are with the module, and on my SD card I've got the new instruments that I've created, I've got the kit bank file that I added a new kit to, and I've also got the individual kit dkit file on my SD card as well. And the last thing that I want to show you is how easy it is to locate each of these on the module, and how you can easily swap between any of them. So to begin with, earlier I mentioned that if you want to, you could have saved your kit bank file as a new kit bank. Now there are two main reasons that you would probably want to do this. The first is to have multiple kit banks with 100 kits each, so that you can have as many kits accessible on your module as you want. And the other reason might be to have the same kits available, but to have different trigger settings for different pad setups. So to swap between different kit banks, you can either hold down the kit button as you turn the module on, or if the module's already on, you can hold down both the more and the kit button for 2 seconds. This will bring up a kit bank selection screen where you can use the top buttons to swap between the different kit banks, and then press the right function button to open one. Next time you turn the module on, the last kit bank that you opened will load. Locating your recently created kit with the editor is very simple. All you need to do is scroll up to the kit number that you saved the kit as. I also showed you that you can save kits as individual dkit files, and you might be wondering, well, why would you want to do this? Well, you can use these to share kits with other 2Box users, or you can play these kits directly off your SD card without them being part of the kit bank file. If you scroll past kit number 100, you'll see that any dkit files that you have on your SD card will show up in alphabetical order. So for example, if I scroll up to N, I can see the new kit 2 file that I saved to my SD card. This is really useful, and I believe that you can have up to 999 on your SD card. Also, if you do have a dkit file on your SD card and you want to add it to your kit bank without using the editor, if you press the save button up at the top and then scroll back across to one of the numbered kits from your kit bank, you can use the copy button to copy that kit settings into that kit bank's kit slot. The new instruments that you've added to the SD card will be available from the kit menu, just like the stock sounds. All you need to do is enter the kit mode and press page down to find the instrument assignment, then either hit the pad or zone that you want to assign the sound to, or select it by using the buttons on the module. To change folders, press in the left function dial, then scroll across to find the correct folder, and then press the function dial again to swap back to the instrument selection. Scroll along to find your instrument, and that's it assigned. If you want to assign a different sound to the rim zone of a tom or snare, once you've assigned the head sound, hold down the more button and press the pad on the module. At first there won't be anything displayed because it's using the rim zone of whatever sound's assigned to the head, but you can now choose to select a different instrument.